Hey, it's Mike. Let's talk about Reaper. Welcome to part 3 of the Preparing to Mix in Reaper series. In part 1, we looked at importing files and organizing them to get your project ready for mixing. In part 2, we looked at gain staging. In this episode, we'll be looking at achieving a rough mix and balance without using plugins. The song we'll be working on is entitled Who's Who in Hell by a band called Last Legacy. The tracks are provided by Cambridge Music Technology, and I'll leave a link in the description so you can download the tracks and follow along. Let's get started. In the last installment, we gain staged our tracks to make sure that we had enough clean headroom for mixing. I've currently got all of my faders at unity, and all the tracks are centered. If we take a listen now, the song won't necessarily sound great, but at the very least, it's not clipping. I can go to pretty much any part of the song and should be able to listen to it without clipping. Now, it does come close in a few parts, but I believe that we've got plenty of room for mixing. The whole purpose for achieving the rough mix is to be able to hear what the song might sound like and also give us some ideas as to what problem areas might exist that would require plugins to fix. I usually like to start with the drums, and of course when working with drums there's always the question of whether you pan to the drummer's perspective or the audience perspective. That's totally up to you. I am a drummer, so I typically like to pan the way that I would hear it if I were behind the kit, but at the same time it makes sense to pan it to the audience perspective because they're the listener. In this case, our overheads are already a stereo track, so I don't have to worry about that. Track 17 here is a bell sample that only appears once in the song. I want to go ahead and turn that down a bit, and I'll just pan it arbitrarily somewhere to the right. We've got two different toms, tom 1 and tom 2. They also have a trigger for each of the toms, and I'll just pan tom 1 to the left, the trigger roughly the same area, and I'll pan the second tom to the right. Now, admittedly, at the moment, I'm just picking random numbers for this pan, and I'll want to go back and listen and see what it sounds like. I may need to adjust it a little bit as I go. Let's see, we've got several different snares. I'll just kind of turn a few of them down. And again, at this point, this is totally at random. I'm just guessing at some places and trying to find a rough balance because I know that I don't need all of these things turned all the way up. I've got my kick and snare centered, I've got my toms panned, my overheads are stereo so I don't have to worry about panning there, and there doesn't appear to be any room mics for this drum kit. So let's solo the drums and just take a listen to a random part and see how it sounds. That's sounding pretty good as far as the stereo feel. I do believe that we need to work a little bit more with the volume balance on this, so I'll play it a little bit more, and essentially all I'm doing is listening and trying to get that drum kit to sound reasonably natural with no elements being too overpowering. It sounded like the overheads were a bit much, so I'll start to work with that a bit and listen to the other elements and see how they fit with each other. Now, I know that at the beginning I had mentioned that I typically like to do this with no plugins, but I think I want to make an exception in this case. If we take a look at track number 12, which is the first tom, looks like I made a mistake here. Let me get my tracks lined back up real quick. There we go. Watch track number 12 for the first tom, and you'll notice that it's triggering an awful lot. I believe that mic was probably picking up the kick. So I think that I'd like to go and just add the stock Reaper gate, and I'll use the preset for toms. That should be sufficient to keep it from triggering too much and giving us any unwanted noise. There, now my toms are a bit cleaner. Drums are sounding pretty good. Let's go ahead and add in another element. Let's bring the bass in. Actually, I think I want to mute these groups. That'll probably make it a little bit easier than me soloing as I go. So we'll work with our drums, and the bass on this is DI. I may end up going against my norm again and adding an amp sim or something to this to give it a little bit of life. Let's take a listen to the bass as is with the drums and see how that sounds. That's not too bad. I think I'll just leave that as is for the time being and move on to the guitars. Now there's several guitar tracks in here, and I have added them to different groups to help me control these a bit better. The part that we're listening to at the moment is most likely just going to be the rhythm guitars, so let's take a listen and see how this is in context at the moment. Now, as you could hear, those guitars are pretty hot compared to everything else. The drums are already turned up as far as they will go, and with my pan and balance, of course, we've lost a little bit of volume versus what we had with everything in Unity. So we'll have to pan out these guitars to give them some space and also get their volume in balance. Another thing that I'd like to do, I believe, with the drums, I've got my pan mode set to stereo pan, which lets me choose left and right pan, but also control the stereo width of the track. I'd like to bring my drums in a bit, maybe around, let's say 80%. I'll just pick a random number for now, but the idea behind this is to set up the panning as if I'm looking at a band on stage, so to speak. So the drums would be more in the center, and then I can pan my guitars hard left and right as if there's two guitarists on stage on either side of the drums. Basically, I just want to make sure that my drums don't run over the guitars that will be on the extreme left and right side. Now, there are some DI tracks in here that I've got muted because I don't necessarily want to add in an amp sim or anything yet. I just want to work with what I've got. So let's take the two guitar tracks, and I will pan one of them hard right and one of them hard left, and let's just take a listen to that. That sounds pretty good. I think I want to bring these guitars down just a little bit. Sounding pretty good so far. Let's go back to the beginning of the song and see what we're sounding like from the front, because there's some leads that I'll need to add into. Now, right out of the gate, that lead is extremely hot, so I will bring that down. And I know that there's going to be vocals there, so I want to try panning that lead maybe just a little bit to the right. Again, there's no right or wrong for this. It's just finding what sounds good and what feels right for you. Maybe pan that a little bit more. Now we're starting to hear that bass is probably a little bit hot. I think that'll be controlled a lot better further down the line when we start to add compression. But for right now, I just, again, want a very rough mix and basic balance with nothing more than pan and volume, with the exception of the plugin that I used to help keep extra noise out of that tom track. Let's see. So we've got some clean guitars that come up a bit later in the track. Let me see if I can find that so we can get those isolated. See, that's track 21. And those are currently up the center. Let's pan those out a bit. Now, I know that there are some leads that are going to come in here as well, if I recall. So let me start with just a 50-50 left and right and see how that sounds. Now already this is starting to come alive just with that basic pan and balance. Things are starting to sound pretty good in my opinion. Let's back up just a hair and listen to another section and see what it's sounding like. Okay, we've got a couple of more leads here that we haven't heard yet. It looks like they're showing up right around here, so let's take a listen and get those balanced out as well. Okay, so those are going to need to be panned. I don't want to put those all the way left and right because they'll compete with the main rhythm, so let's try a 50-50. Okay, those seemed pretty balanced. We'll back it up a bit and listen to it in context. That's sounding pretty good. One thing that I failed to mention is that one problem that you may perceive when you're at this phase is that your mix is not loud. That is to be expected, and the best thing that I can advise for that is to simply turn up your monitors. Until you get proper compression, gain staging, and everything in place, and some limiting as well, it's not going to be as loud as a commercial production, so you really can't compare your mix in progress to something that you hear on the radio. Just turn up your monitors, or maybe add a limiter to your master to give you a little bit of a boost so you can hear better. Now we need to start to take a look at our vocals. It seems like our rough mix and balance with the strings and the drums has come together pretty quickly with just the basic pan and volume. The vocals, we've got quite a bit to work with here, so this part may take a little bit. Our lead vocal has a whole lot of duplicates, and needless to say, we will not be using all of those together. So we'll need to listen to those and start to figure out which one we want to be the primary and which ones we want to be the supporting. So for the time being, let's just find a section at the beginning, and I'll go ahead and solo these lead vocals to where we can try to figure out what's what.
And so broken, you build me up just to...
Now that particular track seems pretty strong, so I think I'm just going to designate that as my proper lead. Let's listen to the next one.
And so broken.
I'll bring that one down a bit and just use it as a supporting track.
So broken,
same for this.
You build me up just to watch me shatter.
Now let's listen to all of those in context.
So broken.
Oh, that's some backgrounds. I want to mute those for a moment and just focus on the lead. I think I'm going to take some of these and pan them ever so slightly just to kind of fill in a little bit around the primary vocal. Not something that's necessary, but I just kind of want to spread these out just a little bit to add a little bit more texture. Okay, let's take a listen to the background vocals and get those blended in as well.
And so broken. And so broken. You build me up just to watch me shatter. And so broken.
I realize I'm not talking nearly as much throughout this video. I think I kind of intend for this video to be more of a fly-on-the-wall type of scenario where you can just sort of watch me work and I'll say something on occasion as needed. Most of this is really just, in my opinion, trial and error and just listening and trying to figure out where things are going to best fit to make the song come alive. I don't really like this vocal. but it needs to be in there somewhere, so let's just mix it in low and see if we can get it to fit. I do like that higher one though. Let's see. Take those down just a little bit further. And now we move on to everyone's favorite part, the screams. There's quite a bit of them in here, and there's highs and lows, gutturals, and all that, and finding somewhere for them all to fit can be a little bit challenging. So it looks like 41 through 44 are what I would consider the primaries. Let's see if we can figure out how to space those out a bit. Okay, that one's a high. Let's move that over to the left a bit. I'll try about, let's say, 25. And this next track is probably a duplicate. Yes, we'll move that one over to the opposite side, about 25%. Unsolo those and take a listen. These could probably stand to be panned a bit. It's very difficult to figure out where to place these because it's kind of the same performance, so to speak. And while you want them to be front and center, at the same time, they might sound pretty cool spread out a bit. I think I want to pan those out even more. Let's try 50. And again, this is just trial and error, so you get to see me making plenty of mistakes and correcting them as I go. That sounds a lot better to me, having those panned out a bit. I think I may want to push them even more. Let's try taking these to about 60%, left and right. And we'll push the other ones a bit further as well. Let's take those to, say, 45. Just picking random numbers and listening and seeing what it sounds like. And I think we're about done with this. I believe that's probably about as far as we're going to get without being able to add some plugins for some compression and some EQ work to help clarify the mix. Let's add Event Horizon to the master. That'll give us a bit of a limiter to increase our volume. And just take a listen to the song from start to finish, see what it sounds like, and make minor adjustments as necessary. I'll take this down a bit to give us a volume boost, and let's take a listen.
shining. I will put you on display for the world to see. Your guys will drown from the flood. Splash. These days I've been dying to live. If I wake up, I hope to never wake up.
And there you have it. You should be able to complete a basic rough mix and balance in a pretty short amount of time. As you listen to your rough mix and balance, be sure to make notes of areas that need some attention. There's a lot of things that I spotted while listening to this that can be corrected with compression and also automation. When deciding to use plugins in a mix, make sure that you've got a purpose in mind and that you're not just dropping in plugins just because you've seen other people use plugins. If you can get a decent sounding mix with basic pan and balance, you should be well on your way to completing a polished mix by adding plugins to help add textures, colors, control dynamics, and bring your mix to life even more. I hope this helps. If you like the content you've been seeing, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and you can support the channel further by clicking the Buy Me a Coffee link below. I don't like this coffee, but my wife does. Please send beans. I need beans.